If you feel guilty for resting, if you feel guilty for saying no, if you feel guilty for choosing yourself, if you feel guilty for needing space, if you feel guilty for not replying fast enough, if you feel guilty for having needs at all, listen closely, because this is not just kindness. This is not just being considerate. This is not just having a big heart. It is a pattern. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. You are the one who notices when the room shifts before anyone else speaks. You are the one who feels tension before it becomes visible. You are the one who adjusts yourself so other people can stay comfortable. You are the one who swallows your feelings so no one else has to feel them. You are the one who says it is okay, even when it is not. And people call you kind. They call you patient. They call you understanding. They call you strong. But no one ever asks what it cost you. Because the truth is, your kindness did not begin as a personality trait. It began as a survival skill. The empath is often the child who was never allowed to be selfish. Not selfish in the cruel way. Selfish in the human way. The way a child is supposed to be selfish. Needing comfort. Needing attention. Needing reassurance. Needing a safe place to be messy. Needing someone to say, "You matter too." If you grew up feeling like your emotions were too much, if you learned that your sadness made things heavy, if you learned that your anger made you bad, if you learned that asking for help came with consequences, if you learned that needing anything created problems, then your nervous system did something very intelligent. It adapted. You became easy to handle. You became the one who did not cause trouble. You became the one who kept the peace. You became the one who read faces and predicted moods. You became the one who adjusted yourself before anyone asked you to. You learned how to disappear without leaving, and people praised you for it. They called you mature. They called you wise beyond your years. They called you strong. They called you resilient. But nobody asked what it cost you, and that cost was you. You learned to earn love by being good for other people. You learned to earn closeness by being useful. You learned to earn safety by being small. So now, as an adult, you confuse love with anxiety. You confuse connection with tension. You confuse being chosen with being needed, and you do not even realize you are doing it. You just feel this constant invisible pressure to stay good, to stay easy, to stay understanding, even when it is slowly draining you. This is the inner world of the empath. And it is not because you are broken, it is because you were trained. Let that land. You were not born believing that your needs were a burden. You were not born believing that rest had to be earned. You were not born believing that love required self-abandonment. You learned it. Your nervous system learned it. Your body learned it. And once the body learns something in childhood, it does not forget. It keeps running the same program long after the danger is gone. That is why even now, when no one is punishing you, you still punish yourself. You overthink your boundaries. You apologize for existing. You rehearse conversations that never happen. You feel responsible for other people's emotions. You feel unsafe disappointing anyone. Your body still believes that being needed is what keeps you safe. This is why choosing yourself feels wrong. This is why resting feels dangerous. This is why saying no makes your chest tighten. This is why space feels like abandonment. This is why boundaries feel like betrayal. Not because they are wrong, but because they are unfamiliar. And unfamiliar feels unsafe to a nervous system that learned love through sacrifice. For so many empaths, kindness was not a choice. It was a strategy, a way to avoid conflict, a way to avoid rejection, a way to avoid emotional punishment. You became the helper, the fixer, the listener, the one who carries, and you call it empathy. But much of it is not empathy. It is survival. Real empathy does not erase you. Real empathy does not require self-abandonment. Real empathy includes you. If your empathy always ends with you exhausted, if it always ends with resentment you feel ashamed of, if it always ends with you disappearing quietly, it is not because you are too sensitive. It is because you were trained to disappear. This is the core wound of the empath. You were not allowed to have normal needs without consequences. You were not allowed to be inconvenient. You were not allowed to say, I want. You were not allowed to say, I do not like this. You were not allowed to say, stop. And if you did, you got a message. Maybe through criticism, maybe through withdrawal, maybe through silence, maybe through anger, maybe through guilt. But your nervous system heard it clearly. Love is conditional. Safety is fragile. Connection must be earned. So you learn to monitor yourself constantly. You learn to scan the room. You learn to stay ahead of other people's emotions. You learn to regulate everyone except yourself. This is why you feel tired in a way sleep does not fix. This is why your body holds tension even when life is calm. This is why your mind never fully rests. Your nervous system is still working overtime to keep you safe. And now, something inside you is shifting. You are tired of being the strong one. You are tired of being the understanding one. You are tired of being the one who always gives. You are tired of shrinking so others can stay comfortable. You are tired of disappearing. And yet, the moment you think about choosing yourself, guilt rises in your chest. Fear tightens your throat. Your mind tells you that you are selfish. Your body tells you that you are in danger. This is the moment every empath eventually reaches. The moment where the old identity stops fitting. The moment where survival starts to feel like self-betrayal. The moment where your soul wants more than just coping. This is not a breakdown. It is an awakening. And it is the beginning of a very different life. But first, there is grief. Because before an empath can choose themselves, they must grieve the version of themselves who survived. They must grieve the child who learned to be small. They must grieve the years spent overgiving. They must grieve the relationships built on self-abandonment. They must grieve the love that was never safe. And grief is not weakness. Grief is the nervous system finally realizing it does not have to stay in survival mode anymore. Grief is the body letting go of a job it never wanted. Grief is the cost of becoming whole. For the first time, you are beginning to see the pattern. For the first time, you are beginning to feel the weight of it. For the first time, you are beginning to realize how much you carried. And for the first time, you are beginning to understand something that changes everything. You were never broken. You were trained. When you have lived as the empath for a long time, you stop noticing how much you are carrying because it becomes normal. It becomes your identity. You do not think, I am monitoring everyone. You think, I am just aware. You do not think, I am managing the emotional temperature of the room. You think, I can just tell when something is off. You do not think, I am abandoning myself. You think, I am being considerate. And that is what makes this so hard to untangle. Because the pattern does not feel like a pattern. It feels like you. But the body knows. The body always knows. Your body knows when you are holding your breath in a conversation you should feel safe in. Your body knows when your shoulders tighten the moment you get a text notification. Your body knows when your stomach drops because someone sounds slightly different than usual. Your body knows when you are smiling while your chest is bracing. This is not overthinking. This is not drama. This is not sensitivity for no reason. This is your nervous system doing what it was trained to do. Because when you were younger, safety was not consistent. Love was not steady. People were not predictable. Sometimes the mood in the room could change in a second. Sometimes your needs were welcomed, and sometimes they were punished. Sometimes you were praised for being mature, and sometimes you were shamed for being emotional. Sometimes you were loved, but only when you were easy. So your system adapted, and the adaptation looked like this: stay alert, stay useful, stay ahead, stay small. That is why you do not fully relax, even when you are resting. You might be lying down, but your body is still scanning. You might be quiet, but your mind is still tracking. You might be off, but you are still on call. And that is exhausting in a way that is hard to explain to someone who has never lived it, because it is not the kind of tired that comes from doing too much. It is the kind of tired that comes from never being able to stop. This is what people do not understand about the empath. They think it is just being kind. They think it is just being caring. But the empath is often carrying an invisible job, a job that should have never belonged to them, the job of keeping other people stable, the job of preventing conflict, the job of managing emotions that were too big in the room, the job of making sure everyone is okay so you can be okay. And that job usually began in childhood, not because you were chosen for it, because there was no one else. Sometimes the empath is the child who learned that their parents' stress became everyone's stress. Sometimes the empath is the child who learned to be the calm one, because someone else was always loud. Sometimes the empath is the child who learned to be perfect, because mistakes were not safe. Sometimes the empath is the child who learned to be the emotional caretaker because the adults were emotionally unavailable. You became skilled at reading what people needed, but you also became skilled at ignoring what you needed. And this is where grief begins. Not the dramatic kind of grief, the quiet, slow kind. The kind that shows up when you realize, I did not get to be a normal child. Because a normal child gets to be inconvenient sometimes. A normal child gets to be messy sometimes. A normal child gets to say no without fearing abandonment. A normal child gets to be sad without being told they are too much. A normal child gets to have needs without feeling like a burden. And if you are listening to this and something inside you is tightening, it is not because you are weak. It is because some part of you remembers, not with words, with sensation, with the heaviness in your chest, with the ache behind your eyes, with the quiet urge to shut down or scroll away, with the subtle urge to disconnect right as something becomes real. That is your nervous system protecting you. Because grief means you are finally seeing what happened. Grief means you are finally naming what it cost you. Grief means you are finally letting the truth touch you. And that can feel unsafe at first. Because if you grew up adapting, you probably grew up skipping grief. You probably learned to move past things quickly. You probably learned to be strong. You probably learned to handle disappointment silently. You probably learned to make sense of pain by being useful. And in a strange way, usefulness became your comfort. Because usefulness meant you had a role. It meant you had value. It meant you were needed. And being needed felt like being safe. This is why so many empaths feel uneasy when people do not need them. Not because you want to be depended on, because your nervous system has been trained to associate being needed with belonging. So when you finally choose yourself, the guilt does not show up because you are doing something wrong. It shows up because you are doing something new. And your body is not used to new. Your body is used to survival. Here is something important to understand. The empath does not just struggle with boundaries because they are too nice. They struggle with boundaries because boundaries change the nervous system's job. A boundary means, I will not manage this for you. A boundary means, I will not absorb this anymore. A boundary means, I will not shrink to make you comfortable. A boundary means I will stay with myself even if you do not like it. And if you were trained to believe that connection requires self-abandonment, then a boundary can feel like danger, not intellectually, physiologically. That is why you can know you should say no and still feel panic when you try. That is why you can know someone is crossing the line and still freeze. That is why you can plan what to say and then suddenly your throat closes when the moment comes. This is not a character flaw. This is a body memory. Your system learned that having needs creates consequences, so it braces when you have needs. Your system learned that saying no creates conflict, so it braces when you say no. Your system learned that making someone upset could mean withdrawal or punishment, so it braces when someone is upset. And if you grew up in an environment where you had to stay attuned to survive emotionally, then your body may still respond to someone's disappointment as if it is a threat, even if the person is not dangerous, even if you are an adult now, even if you are safe, because the nervous system does not update through logic alone. It updates through lived experience. It updates through repetition. It updates through proof. And right now, the proof your body has is old. So grief is not just sadness. Grief is the process of finally telling the truth to your body. The truth is you should not have had to earn love. You should not have had to work for safety. You should not have had to become a caretaker to feel secure. You should not have had to read everyone perfectly to stay connected. You should have been allowed to be human. And when you begin to let yourself feel that, there is often a moment that hits harder than expected. It is the moment you realize your empathy has been costing you your life. Not your literal life, your lived life. Because how many times did you stay in a conversation you did not want to have because you did not want to seem rude? How many times did you explain yourself too much because you did not want to seem difficult? How many times did you agree to something your body did not want because you did not want to disappoint? How many times did you shrink your truth because you did not want to create tension? And the hardest part is this: you probably did not even notice you were doing it. You thought you were being good. You thought you were being mature. You thought you were being loving. But there is a difference between love and self-erasure. There is a difference between compassion and self-abandonment. And if you are an empath, you might have been taught that they are the same thing. So the first stage of choosing yourself is not empowerment, it is honesty. Honesty about your patterns, honesty about your exhaustion, honesty about your resentment, honesty about the silent anger that builds when you give and give and give and still feel unseen. A lot of empaths carry shame about resentment. They think, if I were truly kind, I would not feel this. But resentment is not proof that you are a bad person. Resentment is often proof that you have been crossing your own boundaries to stay connected. Resentment is the part of you that still knows the truth. The part of you that still knows I matter too. And when you start listening to that part, grief comes with it. Because you begin to see how early this started. You begin to see the younger version of you, the one who noticed the mood and adjusted, the one who learned to be easy, the one who learned to be helpful, the one who learned to anticipate what other people needed. And maybe for the first time, instead of praising that child for being strong, you feel tenderness. Because that child should not have had to be strong. That child should have been protected. And if you are feeling emotional right now, that is not regression. That is repair. It is repair to finally stop glorifying your survival adaptations. It is repair to stop calling self-abandonment empathy. It is repair to stop confusing hyper-awareness with emotional intelligence. Because sometimes what people call your intuition is actually your body's fear of the next emotional shift. Sometimes what people call your sensitivity is actually your nervous system staying braced. Sometimes what people call your kindness is actually a learned strategy to prevent rejection. And none of this is to shame you. It is to free you, because you cannot change what you are still calling your personality. You cannot heal what you still think is just who you are. So let us name it clearly, with care. Your core trait may have been a survival adaptation, not because you are fake, because you are intelligent. You adapted in the most effective way you could. You became attuned. You became responsible. You became considerate. You became helpful. And it worked. It kept you connected. It kept you safer. It kept you from being targeted. It kept you from being dismissed. But there is a moment in every empath's life where what once protected them begins to cost them more than it gives. And that moment is here. Because you cannot build a life on self-erasure and call it peace. You can only call it peace until your body starts protesting. And maybe it already has. Maybe it shows up as chronic tension. Maybe it shows up as fatigue. Maybe it shows up as shutting down after social time. Maybe it shows up as feeling numb when you are finally alone. Maybe it shows up as anxiety that does not make sense. Maybe it shows up as a quiet depression that feels like disconnection from yourself. This is your system telling you something, not in a loud way, in a steady way. The way your body speaks when it has been ignored for a long time. It is saying, I cannot keep living like this. And that is where empowerment begins. Not the loud kind, the grounded kind. The kind that starts with one simple shift. You stop treating your needs like a problem. You stop treating rest like something you have to justify. You stop treating boundaries like cruelty. You stop treating your space like abandonment. You stop treating your truth like a threat. And you begin to recognize something that may feel both relieving and terrifying. If your nervous system was trained, it can be retrained. Not overnight, not through forcing, not through pretending you do not care, through repetition, through safety, through practice, through choosing yourself in small ways until your body begins to believe you. That is what we are going to move into next. Not a lecture, not a diagnosis, not theory, a lived pathway, a gentle reorientation where your empathy stops being a prison and becomes a choice. There is a moment that comes for every empath when something inside them quietly says, I cannot keep living like this. It is not dramatic. It is not loud. It is not impulsive. It is a deep, steady knowing. A knowing that comes after years of overgiving, after years of holding space for everyone, after years of carrying emotions that were never yours to carry, after years of shrinking so others could stay comfortable. It is the moment your body finally says enough, not in anger, in truth. This is the moment when the old identity begins to loosen. The identity of the strong one, the identity of the understanding one, the identity of the one who never needs anything, the identity of the one who can handle everything. This is the moment when the nervous system begins to realize that survival is no longer the goal. Living is. And this is where everything starts to change. Because when an empath finally chooses themselves, it does not look like becoming cold. It does not look like becoming selfish. It does not look like becoming harsh. It looks like becoming honest. Honest about what feels right. Honest about what feels wrong. Honest about what your body can handle. Honest about what your heart needs. And honesty is terrifying at first, because your nervous system learned that honesty was dangerous. It learned that saying what you really feel could lead to rejection. It learned that expressing needs could create conflict. It learned that disappointing people could cost you connection. So when you start choosing yourself, your body reacts like you are doing something wrong. Your chest tightens. Your stomach drops. Your thoughts race. Your mind looks for reasons to go back. This is not because you are weak. It is because your body is learning a new language. For years, your system equated safety with compliance. Now you are teaching it that safety can exist with self-respect. That is a radical shift. And radical shifts feel threatening to a nervous system that was built around stability through sacrifice. So the first thing that happens when an empath chooses themselves is discomfort. Not because self-respect is wrong, but because it is unfamiliar. Your system says, this is new, this is unpredictable, this is risky. And your mind interprets that as guilt. But guilt is not always a moral signal. Sometimes guilt is just an echo of conditioning. Sometimes guilt is just your nervous system remembering old rules. Rules like, do not make waves, do not upset anyone, do not be difficult, do not ask for too much, do not take up space. When you break these rules, your body reacts as if you are breaking the law, even when the law was never fair, even when the law was never meant to protect you. This is why so many empaths mistake discomfort for danger. They feel the anxiety of change and assume they are doing something wrong. But discomfort is not the same as harm. Discomfort is often the doorway to freedom. So, what actually happens when an empath starts choosing themselves? The first thing that happens is this. You begin to notice your body. Not in a vague way, in a real way. You start noticing when something feels heavy. You start noticing when your chest tightens. You start noticing when your stomach knots. You start noticing when your shoulders creep up toward your ears. Because your body has been speaking to you for a long time. You were just taught to override it. You were taught to ignore your signals. You were taught to push through. You were taught to minimize your discomfort. You were taught that your limits were weaknesses. So choosing yourself begins with listening. Listening to the part of you that says, this is too much. Listening to the part of you that says, I need space. Listening to the part of you that says, I am tired. Listening to the part of you that says, I do not want this. Not with judgment, with curiosity. This is a nervous system skill, because when you were younger, your body learned that speaking up was not safe. So it learned to go quiet. It learned to endure. It learned to brace. It learned to dissociate from discomfort. And now, as an adult, you are inviting it back into the conversation. You are saying, I am listening now. That alone is powerful. The second thing that happens is grief resurfaces in waves. Because every time you honor a need now, you touch the memory of when you could not. Every time you rest without guilt, you touch the part of you that was never allowed to stop. Every time you say no, you meet the child who was punished for it. This can feel overwhelming. You might find yourself crying after setting a boundary. You might feel shaky after choosing rest. You might feel emotional after saying what you really feel. This is not weakness. This is your nervous system releasing old stored survival energy. Your body finally realizing, I am allowed to be here. I am allowed to take up space. I am allowed to exist without earning it. This is what healing actually looks like. Not becoming someone else, becoming yourself. The third thing that happens is you begin to feel a new kind of strength. Not the strength of endurance, not the strength of sacrifice, not the strength of silence, the strength of presence. The strength of staying with yourself even when others are uncomfortable. The strength of holding your ground without needing to explain. The strength of letting someone be disappointed without fixing it. The strength of trusting your inner signals. This strength feels strange at first because it is not loud, it is not aggressive, it is not forceful, it is steady, it is rooted. It comes from knowing that your worth is not dependent on being needed. It comes from knowing that your presence is enough. And that is when something shifts inside you. You start noticing that not everyone likes the new you. Some people will push back. Some people will guilt you. Some people will say you have changed. Some people will say you are selfish. Not because you are wrong, but because your old self made their life more comfortable. Your old self made it easy for them to take. Your old self made it easy for them to lean. Your old self made it easy for them to avoid their own work. And when you stop carrying what was never yours, the system changes. This is where many empaths get stuck. They confuse other people's discomfort with their own wrongdoing. But someone being unhappy with your boundary does not mean your boundary is wrong. Someone feeling disappointed does not mean you have failed. Someone being upset does not mean you have caused harm. It means the relationship is adjusting. And not all relationships survive adjustment. This is one of the hardest truths for empaths. Because if you were trained to maintain connection at any cost, losing relationships can feel like losing safety. But sometimes the relationships that fall away are the ones that only existed because you were abandoning yourself. And that is not love. That is a contract that says, I will shrink so you can stay comfortable. And when you break that contract, the relationship has to either grow or end. This is where real discernment begins. You start to see who respects your boundaries. You start to see who only valued your compliance. You start to see who can meet you as an equal. You start to see who only felt safe when you were small. This can be painful, but it is also clarifying, because choosing yourself is not about becoming isolated. It is about making space for relationships that can actually hold you. Relationships where you do not have to perform. Relationships where you do not have to manage. Relationships where you do not have to disappear. And as your nervous system learns that you can say no and still be loved, something inside you softens. Your shoulders drop more easily. Your breath deepens. Your mind quiets. Your body begins to trust. This is the beginning of regulation, not because life is perfect, but because you are finally on your own side. You begin to realize that your empathy is not meant to be a life sentence. It is meant to be a gift you get to offer, not a burden you are forced to carry. And when you choose yourself, your empathy becomes cleaner. It becomes grounded. It becomes sustainable. It becomes mutual. You no longer give from depletion. You give from fullness. You no longer rescue. You support. You no longer disappear. You stay. And most importantly, you begin to build a relationship with yourself. A relationship where you are allowed to be tired. A relationship where you are allowed to change. A relationship where you are allowed to grow. A relationship where you are allowed to say, this is who I am now. This is what happens when an empath finally chooses themselves. They stop living in reaction. They start living in alignment. They stop confusing survival with love. They start building safety from within. They stop running on old programming. They start writing a new story. And that story does not begin with guilt. It begins with permission. There is a quiet moment that comes after the first few boundaries. A moment where you realize something surprising. The world did not collapse. The people who truly care about you did not disappear. The sky did not fall. You did not lose your worth. But something did shift. You feel yourself differently. You walk into rooms with less tension in your shoulders. You notice your breath before you speak. You pause instead of rushing to fix. You listen to your body instead of overriding it. And for the first time, you begin to experience yourself not as a role, but as a person. This is where identity reclamation begins. Not by becoming someone new, by remembering who you were before you learned to disappear. Because the empath identity, as it has been lived, is often built around one central belief. I am here to make things easier for everyone else. But that is not who you are. That is who you became. And there is a difference. You are not here to carry everyone. You are not here to regulate the room. You are not here to earn love through exhaustion. You are not here to disappear for connection. You are here to live. And when that truth starts to settle into your nervous system, your sense of self begins to shift. You stop defining yourself by how much you give. You stop measuring your worth by how needed you are. You stop seeing rest as laziness. You stop seeing space as abandonment. You begin to see yourself as someone who is allowed to have a life, a real life, a life with limits, a life with preferences, a life with boundaries, a life with rest, a life with choice. And this can feel disorienting at first because for so long, your identity was built around being the one who holds everything together. When you step out of that role, you might wonder, who am I if I am not the strong one? Who am I if I am not the fixer? Who am I if I am not the one who carries? This is not a loss. It is a return to the part of you that was always there, waiting for safety. The part of you that wants to laugh without scanning the room. The part of you that wants to rest without guilt. The part of you that wants to say what they feel without fear. The part of you that wants to take up space without apology. This is the self you are reclaiming. And it does not happen all at once. It happens in moments. Moments where you choose to leave when you are tired. Moments where you say no without explaining. Moments where you let someone feel disappointed. Moments where you choose rest over proving. These moments may seem small, but to your nervous system, they are revolutionary. Because every time you choose yourself, you are teaching your body a new truth. I am safe with me. I am allowed to be here. I am allowed to take up space. I am allowed to change. This is what creates real confidence. Not bravado, not pretending, not performance. Trust. Trust in your inner signals. Trust in your boundaries. Trust in your right to exist without justification. And as this trust grows, your relationships change. You stop attracting people who only want to take. You start attracting people who can meet you. You stop staying where you are tolerated. You start choosing where you are valued. You stop accepting crumbs. You start asking for presents. Because once you stop abandoning yourself, you cannot stay where you are unseen. Your nervous system will not let you. It has learned what safety feels like. It has learned what respect feels like. It has learned what it means to be in your own corner. And that changes everything. You start building a life that fits your actual capacity. You start choosing work that does not drain your soul. You start creating routines that support your body. You start surrounding yourself with people who do not require you to perform. And slowly, quietly, the old identity loosens. The one that says, I am only lovable if I am useful. I am only safe if I am needed. I am only valued if I am easy. That identity fades. And in its place, something stronger emerges. Self-respect. Not the kind that hardens you, the kind that softens you, the kind that lets you say, I matter too, without guilt. This is what it means for an empath to finally choose themselves. It is not a rejection of who you were. It is an honoring of who you had to be and a release of what you no longer need to carry. Because the truth is, you were never meant to live in constant vigilance. You were never meant to carry the emotional weight of every room you enter. You were never meant to earn your place through exhaustion. You were meant to live in connection with yourself. And when you do, your empathy becomes something beautiful again. Not a burden, not a prison, a bridge between you and others that does not require self-erasure, a bridge that is built on mutual respect, a bridge that allows you to give without disappearing. This is the life on the other side of survival. This is the life your nervous system has been waiting for. There is a moment, often quiet and ordinary, when you realize something has fundamentally changed. You are standing in a room that once made your chest tighten. You are in a conversation that once required you to manage everyone's emotions. You are facing a situation where you used to abandon yourself. And this time, you do not. You notice your breath. You feel your feet on the floor. You listen to your body before you respond. You stay, not in tension, in presence. And in that moment, something settles inside you. You are not performing. You are not bracing. You are not scanning. You are simply here. This is what it feels like when an empath finally comes home to themselves. Not because life is suddenly easy, but because you are no longer living in survival mode. You are no longer living as the child who had to be hyper-aware. You are no longer living as the one who had to carry everything. You are no longer living as the one who had to disappear to stay connected. You are living as an adult who is allowed to have needs. This is the final shift, the shift from survival identity to integrated self. And it is the most powerful change of all. Because once you stop living as who you had to be, you can finally become who you are. You are not here to be the emotional container for everyone else. You are not here to absorb pain so others do not have to feel it. You are not here to keep the peace at the cost of your truth. You are here to live a life that feels like yours. A life where your body is not constantly bracing. A life where your mind is not always scanning. A life where your heart is not always overextending. A life where you get to breathe. This is what happens when an empath finally chooses themselves. They begin to experience a kind of freedom they did not know was possible. The freedom of saying no without collapse. The freedom of resting without shame. The freedom of taking space without fear. The freedom of choosing relationships that feel safe. The freedom of trusting their inner signals. And slowly, their nervous system learns a new truth. Connection does not require self-erasure. Love does not require sacrifice. Safety does not require perfection. You are allowed to be human. You are allowed to be tired. You are allowed to be imperfect. You are allowed to change your mind. You are allowed to grow. You are allowed to outgrow people. You are allowed to choose a life that feels aligned. This is not selfishness. This is self-respect. And self-respect is what allows your empathy to finally breathe. When you choose yourself, your empathy does not disappear. It becomes clean. It becomes grounded. It becomes mutual. It becomes a gift you offer, not a role you perform. You no longer give to be loved. You give because you want to. You no longer help to stay safe. You help because it feels right. You no longer disappear to keep connection. You stay as you are. And the relationships that grow from that place are different. They feel steady. They feel reciprocal. They feel nourishing. You are no longer the one who carries everything. You are the one who stands in their truth. And that truth is simple. You were never broken. You were trained. You were trained to be small. You were trained to be easy. You were trained to be responsible for other people's emotions. You were trained to earn love through self-abandonment. But training can be unlearned. Patterns can be rewritten. Nervous systems can heal. And identities can evolve. You are not betraying who you were by choosing yourself. You are honoring what you survived. You are honoring the child who adapted. You are honoring the part of you that stayed strong. You are honoring the part of you that learned to read the room. You are honoring the part of you that kept you safe. And now you are giving that part permission to rest. You are saying, thank you for protecting me. I am safe now. You can stand down. This is what healing actually is. Not fixing something that is broken, releasing something that is no longer needed. You are not becoming a different person. You are becoming a freer one, a freer mind, a freer body, a freer heart, a life where you do not have to earn your place, a life where you do not have to prove your worth, a life where you do not have to shrink to belong. You belong as you are right now, and you are allowed to choose yourself. Not one day, not when everyone else is okay, not when you have done enough. Now, because your life is not a waiting room, it is happening. And the most powerful thing an empath can ever do is stop surviving and start living. You were never broken. You were trained. And now you are finally free to choose yourself.